Today, television and movie star Claude Akins shows you the first automobile. You'll see exciting race cars from museums around the country, including Cale Yarborough at the Stock Car Hall of Fame in Darlington, South Carolina, and outstanding stories of race cars at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. You'll see the history-making 999 race car that helped found the Ford Motor Company. It's part of a fabulous $6 million exhibit at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Coming up next here on the Superchargers.
The Superchargers, National Championship and Unique Motorsports.
Hi everybody, I'm Jan Gabriel and welcome once again to another special edition of the Superchargers. Today we're going to travel all around the country looking at automobile museums, particularly ones that house historic race cars, like this one. This is the Henry Ford Museum here in Dearborn, Michigan. And of course here they're celebrating the automobile in American life. Now the early automobiles here in the United States were imported from Europe, like this one. This is Carl Benz Velo. It was the very first production car. Now, Carl Benz is also credited with building the very first automobile, and it happens to be housed in a museum in Los Angeles. And here to tell us about it is television and movie star Claude Akins.
And this is it, the very first gas-powered motor car. It was patented in 1886 by that famous German inventor Carl Benz. So, now you know. Henry Ford did not invent the first automobile. However, there were two other vehicles we found that were invented even earlier. In 1863, J.J. Etienne Lenoir built the first internal combustion powered road vehicle, but he only made one and never had it patented. The other was built in 1875 by Siegfried Marcus, an Austrian inventor. And he stated publicly that his contraption was a waste of time and money, and he never pursued it further. Carl Benz, on the other hand, wanted to not only build the first car, he intended to market it as well. By 1895, he was selling 135 cars a year to the European market. His car was successful as well as practical, which is why Carl Benz gets the credit for inventing the first gas-powered car. Now, let's take a look at another car that was being built about the same time. This is the workshop of Gottlieb Daimler, who invented the second automobile. Naturally, he thought it was the first. Neither Daimler nor Benz knew each other, even though they lived only 60 miles apart. Benz's patent was granted just 5 months before Daimler's. Then, 40 years later, after years of bitter rivalry, their two companies eventually merged. Race cars built by Daimler represented a significant advancement in both engine and chassis technology. In 1914, they took first, second, and third place in the French Grand Prix that year. The second place car was shipped to the United States by American race driver Ralph De Palma, who drove it to victory in the 1915 Indianapolis 500. By 1926, Benz and Daimler had combined to form a company that continues building world-class cars to this day. So, there you have it, a little bit about the origin of the automobile.
Thanks, Claude Akins. You know, it didn't take long for the American populace to really fall in love with the automobile. And the next logical step, of course, was automobile racing. And today we have many forms to enjoy, including NASCAR racing, which started on the beaches of Daytona. They started back in the 30s, the 40s, and 50s in cars like this, virtually stock cars. No modifications. They weren't souped up at all. No safety features. But these cars still prevail in this day and age in a museum in Darlington, South Carolina. It's the Joe Weatherly Stock Car Hall of Fame. And waiting for us down there is NASCAR champion Cale Yarborough.
Jan, this is a 1951 Hudson, known as the fabulous Hudson Hornet, which they used to run on the beaches at Daytona. It was a stock car. That's where stock car racing really got started. This particular car won the second Southern 500 here at Darlington. It was driven by people like Herb Thomas, the Flock brothers, Tim and Fonnie, and it was truly a stock car. It has no safety features whatsoever. They used to drive it to the racetrack to enter it in the race. This is a 1959 Chevrolet, driven by Jim Reed. This race car was taken to Daytona Beach when the Daytona Beach Speedway was built in 1959. 2.5 miles, very high speed. Now, a lot of things started happening along this time. The engine sizes started getting bigger. The tire companies were really getting involved in racing, and the race cars had a lot of safety features about them, such as a trap door down on the right side of the floorboard, so you could see the tire if it was wearing out. You'd watch the tire, and when you started to seeing the white streak come in the tire, you knew it was time to make a pit stop and change them. Several different features in this race car make them modern-day race cars, such as a very sophisticated roll cage, seat belts. All these things started coming into play because the speeds were getting very high.
Thanks, Gail Yarborough. How stock car racing moved from the beaches of Daytona onto the super speedways is truly an American success story. But if there is one race that is more outstanding than any other, it's the Indianapolis 500. Matter of fact, even Henry Ford wanted to win that race. In 1935, he commissioned Harry Miller to build 10 V8 Ford race cars for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. 7 of the cars qualified, and only 2 finished the race, far behind the leader. Henry Ford never went back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Well, there are car stories and driver stories that abound, but there is one in particular that we found fascinating. And here to tell you about it is Paul Page, the voice of the Indianapolis 500.
This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum. It is here where they house the great racing cars of the decades and pay tribute to the men who drove them. There are many myths and legends connected with the unrelenting quest for speed. It was a mystery to many how the Marmon Wasp became the first car to win the very first 500-mile race back in 1911. Driven by Ray Haroon, it was dubbed unsafe and unreliable because it was a single-seater, the only one of its kind in that first race. It won with an average speed of 74.5 miles an hour. Every tale that is told about these mysterious and powerful machines contains a dose of the unusual, even the bizarre. In racing, death is a constant passenger. Only the most daring and skilled driver can take a car to the limit and avoid disaster. But there was one car that even the best could not tame. The mystery surrounding the Bose Sealfast Special continues even today. In 1935, a driver named Johnny Hannon had been hired by car owner Leon DeRay to make his debut at Indianapolis by driving number 45. Although a rookie, Hannon's previous accomplishments had given him the credibility to run at Indy. He felt confident that he was going to win the 500 this first time out. It was never to happen. During his first practice run, Hannon never appeared through the fourth turn. No one had reported seeing the car stop on the track. In fact, the car was nowhere in sight. Finally, DeRay found fresh skid marks in turn 3. As he looked over the wall, he was shocked to discover his damaged race car sitting upright on the edge of a cornfield. Hannon was dead, his riding mechanic severely injured. Hannon's quest for instant speed had brought him to a swift meeting with death. That one incident, however, was not to be the end of the mystery and tragedy surrounding number 45. Only 6 days later, veteran driver Clay Weatherly qualified the car for the 9th row. Here's where the story becomes almost bizarre. On the 10th lap, Weatherly, like Hannon before him, lost control of the machine and crashed. He died instantly. and his riding mechanic was also killed. The tragedy put a pall on the running of the 1935 race, as the mystery surrounding this death car intensified. What prompted both drivers to lose control? Was foul play involved? Was the car jinxed? Why wasn't it pulled from the race after the first fatality? Well, today, these questions still go unanswered, but the story does not end here. In 1936, this infamous car was back in the lineup, driven by a young Frenchman named Cliff Berger. Why any driver would accept a ride in the same machine that had killed 3 of his colleagues within 9 days of each other is unknown. But because Berger did, the jinx that had haunted the Bose Seal Fast Special was now broken. The 1936 driver of Leon Duray's death car did not win the race that year. But unlike his predecessors, he did live to tell about it. I'm Paul Page.
This car is a real road racer. Well, if you could call it that. Back then, there weren't too many roads and the weather was always bad. This is a 1903 Packard Runabout. This car is called Old Pacific after it made a coast-to-coast run. Now, just 5 years later, an American Thomas Flyer would set all-time marathon records in a race from New York to Paris.
The Thomas Flyer still exists today, just as it was. You can see it at the Harrah's Automobile Collection in Reno, Nevada. Now, the race itself was a spectacular event for the times. It started in Times Square in New York with 50,000 people cheering them on. They went westward through Buffalo, Cleveland, Toledo, and Chicago. Early on, the Thomas Flyer made it clear it was the car to beat by establishing a fast early lead. This American entry had a 70-horsepower engine, and the weather was awful and stayed that way, with high snow drifts and nearly impassable roads. West of Chicago, the snow turned to rain, which made the Thomas Flyer's struggle westward even more difficult. The exhausted competitors finally arrived in San Francisco 41 days after the start of the race. The cars in the running had been reduced to 4, the Flyer, the Italian Zust, the French Didion, and the German Protos. All 4 were boarded on ships to continue the race in Japan. The Japanese had never seen a car before and were so inquisitive that they slowed the progress of the race. And crossing Asia was a nightmare. There just weren't any roads. What the Flyer did was to straddle the railroad tracks of the Trans-Siberian Railway and drive on the ties, which was very hard on the car. Whenever there was a breakdown, the parts had to be replaced or repaired by the crew. It took an incredible amount of ingenuity, but in the end, the Americans prevailed and won the race, as the Thomas Flyer rolled into Paris on July 30th, 171 days after the start. An accomplishment never equaled. And we'll be right back with more here on the Superchargers.
We're back on the Superchargers. I'm Jan Gabriel. Today, we're taking a look at race cars from various museums, like this one, the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And have I found a race car? This is Henry Ford's 999. It's the car that helped start the Ford Motor Company.
The car attracted investors wherever it went. Since the 999 had the most powerful 4-cylinder engine ever built, it had no trouble winning races and establishing speed records with Barney Oldfield at the wheel. It was the first automobile to run faster than a mile a minute, clocking in as high as 92 miles per hour.
Now, in 1902, I suppose that was considered pretty fast. But by today's standards, that was real slow. Today, cars are running as fast as 280 miles an hour. We're talking about top-fuel dragsters. And the one man who knows more about them than anybody else is Big Daddy Don Garlitz. He now is the proprietor of a museum down in Ocala, Florida. Let's go down there.
Our museum is a little bit different in that this is the Museum of Drag Racing. In this museum are cars from the very beginning of our sport, when it was just an infant. Cars from the Golden Greek, Chris Karamessinas, Tommy Ivo, and many others of this early era, including my cars. The original Swamp Rat is in the museum. And then, of course, we have cars from today, Tom the Mongoose McEwen, Shirley Muldowney, the car that was in the movie Heart Like a Wheel. There are over 53 cars in this museum, and it takes over an hour to go through it. This is Swamp Rat 1. It was built in 1956 in my home garage in Tampa, Florida, for the whopping sum of about $1,000. It was the first car to use the bike front wheels and the 8 carburetor manifold. It also was one of the first cars that received any type of sponsorship in drag racing. This is John Lucas' Fuel Coupe out of the mid-60s. This was the cars that ran prior to the advent of the funny car. These little cars were pure dragster, fuel-burning nitromethane powered Hemi engines with little bodies on them like this one here, 1940 Bantam body. They reached speeds almost comparable to the fuel dragsters. When the funny car came along and used the late model bodies in 1966, these cars soon faded out. It was very unique that we found this car. It had been stored in an 18-wheeler trailer for many, many years, and when John was cleaning up his trucking company's backyard, here this little car was stored completely intact in this 18-wheel trailer, and he kept it, completely cleaned it up, restored it, and sent it down to the museum. And I think it's the last one in existence that's so complete. So I'd like to invite all of you to come on down and visit the Museum of Drag Racing, located on Interstate 75, just south of Ocala. And now back to Jan Gabriel.
Thanks, Don Garlitz. As funny cars and top-fuel dragsters continue to blister the quarter mile at better than 280 miles an hour, it's cars like these, Indianapolis cars, that travel the closed course at over 220 miles an hour. Now, the first man to do it was Buddy Baker. He did it at Talladega, Alabama in a full-bodied car, 200 miles an hour, back in the 1970s. In Talladega right now is Linda Marshall.
Unless you're a race fan, you may not know Talladega, Alabama is the home of the world's fastest super speedway for NASCAR Grand National stock cars. And just a few hundred feet away is this exciting place we're visiting today, the International Motorsports Hall of Fame. Inside you'll find some of the world's most famous race cars. Let's go inside and take a look. Jan told you earlier that Buddy Baker was the first man to ever drive a stock-bodied automobile over 200 miles an hour. And this is the car he did it in March of 1970. Actual speed, 200.447 miles an hour. A similar car, built by Harry Hyde and driven by Bobby Isaac, set 28 world and national land speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats. These were the most unique-looking cars ever built for Grand National stock. I bet you thought you were just going to see stock cars today on the Superchargers. Well, not so. Here at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, there are a number of land speed record holders as well, including one of the most novel of all, Art Arfon's Green Monster. Now, over the years, there have been a number of Green Monsters, but this is the original. And this is the first dragster to ever go 150 miles an hour in a quarter mile. If you're wondering what Art's doing today, well, you'll probably find him at a national championship tractor pull. He and his son Tim are top competitors with turbine-powered tractors. This Allison aircraft engine did a great job for Art Arfons, but an even bigger Rolls-Royce engine helped another man make speed history even earlier. Powered by a 2,500 horsepower Rolls-Royce engine, this car became the most famous land speed record holder of all time. This is the Bluebird, and it was in 1935 that Sir Malcolm Campbell drove the Bluebird to a top recorded speed of 330 miles an hour on Daytona Beach. The next stop was Utah and the Bonneville Salt Flats, where the Bluebird made a two-way run and set an average speed record of 301.13 miles an hour. No car ever built anywhere in the world and powered by one engine driving through a conventional transmission and rear end has traveled as fast as the Bluebird. The Bluebird is in the same condition as when it was found a few years ago, and although she may look a little worse for the wear, her presence is awesome. We've been showing you some very fast and exciting cars on the Superchargers today, but remember, there's always danger involved. Every time a driver straps himself into his race car, as you know, he's going to take a very big risk. Here at the Hall of Fame, you'll see Phil Parsons' car number 66. It's displayed in exactly the same condition as it was taken off the Alabama International Motor Speedway following a spectacular crash. Phil was lucky to have survived and with only minor injuries. On lap number 72 of a 500-mile race, Phil, the younger brother of Benny Parsons, tangled with Darrell Waltrip's car, starting a savage 11-car crash that sent Parsons into the air, barrel-rolling wildly as the cars entered turn number 1. Parsons' car had to be carried back to the garage on the bed of a truck. The fact that none of the drivers were seriously injured can be credited to NASCAR's safety features and strict construction regulations. Before leaving, I'd like to thank all of the great people here at the International Motorsports Hall of Fame for all of their help.
We're back on the Superchargers with just enough time for a final word. And that word is thanks to the good folks here at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Till next time, I'm Jan Gabriel for the Superchargers.